Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the oil painting workshop. Hi, Seema. How are you
Good, thank you.
today? So, I think one more person might be joining, but I think we can already get started. So, good stuff is in process today. And hello to Enrique, Moss, and Seema. Yes, me too. Awesome. So, I don't know if you have any experience with painting before, maybe in aquarella, watercolors, or acrylics, like Seema you mentioned. So you are like if you can apply the same techniques that I'm teaching you in oil in acrylic, that'll be great because the difference is texture and mediums. Basically, you acrylic is water based and oil is oil based, obviously, but you can achieve similar results with both mediums. They are kind of like this thick, buttery sort of nice painting, as opposed to aquarella, which is extremely fluid and extremely translucent. So, before we start, I'm just going to explain to you what my plan is. We're going to do a little bit of theoretical stuff so that you understand the basics really well, and then I'm going to show you some like materials and things that you can buy if you want to pursue oil painting on your own time, so that you have a checklist. You know that what you're buying is not just random. You are quite sure of what you're investing in, because oil paints can be expensive and they take a little bit of time to get used to. So just understanding the materials that you're going to be working with. So I have it all laid down here. I'm going to show that to you in some time. And basically, I'm going to start the workshop today with some theory. People who have been studying with me will know that I always focus on the aspect of values. Okay. Uh, Values does not mean good decisions or good morals in the concept of art. It is essentially the understanding of light and shadow. I think, Seema, you must have known this concept
Yes,
where I mention it a few times, right?
yes, yes.
Classes, yes. Um, if you notice my background, all of these are black and white, portraits, drawings, whatever. The top one is a charcoal, and the bottom one is a painting in grisaille. Okay, what is grisaille? When I use this word, it's written Grisaille. Grisaille is just French for grayscale painting. And every time that a new artist is introduced to the world of painting, they get started with grisaille painting. Okay, because it's much easier to control black and white as opposed to a range of different colors. Because once we get into colors, it's a whole different picture. Okay, so step by step, like I literally spent 3 years out of my 4 years in art school only doing, like, first 2 years was only drawing in pencil and charcoal, and the third year was only painting in gray. Like, they didn't even let us like touch colors, is because understanding your values will give you such a strong base that then your colors are easier. Okay. Today, all of these doubts are going to be cleared. So let me share my screen and I will explain to you bit by bit what you're going to get into. Please feel free to ask me any questions that you might have. And yeah, let's just have fun. If you have a notepad and a pen, it'll be good to take some notes. And of course, this meeting is being recorded, so I'll share the recording with you if you want to see it in the future, or it'll be helpful for you. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. All right. So, some of my older students must have seen this image before, but it is extremely important to revisit this aspect. Okay, I'm just going to read a couple of things that I have written here. An object only exists when light touches it. Without light, there would only be darkness, and we would never actually understand what anything looked like. At the end of it, it's pretty logical. Basically, reality would cease to exist. If light exists, so does the object, and if object exists, it will cast a shadow when interacting with the light. So essentially, what we're doing is understanding lights and shadows, which we call as values. Okay? Once that is clear, now here, why do we have this image here? Okay? Once you start getting into 3D painting, not 3D, but like if you want to be a realistic painter, if you're an abstract painter, be abstract. None of this really matters. Even if you are an abstract painter, knowing values will help you greatly because then you'll know how to balance your colors, you'll know how to make much more dynamic pieces. But if you want to pursue realism and understand how things and objects around us actually function, then you have to kind of get down to the basics. Okay, I'm going to zoom in, forget about all the other objects. These two are our main focuses, a cube and a sphere. Okay, why? Because literally everything can be subdivided into these two categories. A table is probably a cube, a cup is probably a sphere. I don't know, a car is a mixture of a cube and a sphere because it has softer, like rounder edges, but it is also in the shape of a cube. So, getting to know our basic blocks, the building blocks of painting or like realism drawing, is extremely important so that all your other things then start to make sense. Okay. So, I always begin my classes by like these classes that are focusing on serious like painting by first starting to paint a cube, and then we'll get into painting a sphere. Okay. Any questions so far? Please feel free to ask me. Okay. So when I do the demo now, after I explain to you certain concepts, I'm going to be painting the cube and the sphere. I will encourage you to first observe it, and then in your own time or during the duration of this class, you can try it and paint it yourself so that I can have a look at it and give you real-time feedback. All right. It's all going to be in grayscale, in grisaille. Okay. So you can probably have a white and a black. And if your palette allows, like if you have the color raw umber or burnt umber, either of these are good. But you can tell me which one you have and we can talk about it. Okay. So sphere and cube, two building blocks of our painting journey. But before we get into that, there are slight like everything in, because this is such a new area of kind of like a new language that you are learning to speak, everything obviously has a sort of technical term for it, which it's better to know it at this stage because then you're going to be able to think like step by step in that direction. Okay, so before I actually go into the technical terms for this, I just want you to observe this and understand where the direction of light is coming from. Okay. So essentially, we know that like even anyone who's not an artist will be able to say that the direction of light is obviously from the top right. Okay, which is why the object is casting a shadow on the diagonal axis of this light. Okay, and obviously in this case, since there is just one shadow of the object, there is obviously just one source of light. In reality, there are multiple sources of lights. Okay, so we try to restrict ourselves when we are painting in our studio. We try to restrict ourselves to one source of light so that we're not overwhelmed with all that's going around. Okay, am I going too fast or is it okay? You can tell me in the messages so that I know. This is good. Great. Awesome. So now let's just break this down a little bit into simpler terms. Let's call the light family the basically the core light, okay? And the shadow family is the core shadow, okay? So obviously this part that is outside of our object is the cast shadow. It's known as the cast shadow because the object is casting a shadow, okay? The term for that is cast shadow. Now we see this kind of like darker line here, okay? That is known as the terminator. The terminator, why? Is where the light is terminating, essentially. Pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm going to be using these terms as we go further, so I want you to keep them in mind, maybe write them down. Okay, let me write it for you here. This is the cast shadow. Okay, and this darkish line here, which is this here, is known as the, it's better to type it probably, terminator. Okay, so basically, we have the shadow family and the light family. We don't see much happening in the lights, but we do see some variations in the shadow. Okay, so then the next step would be like obviously this is dark black and this is white. So the things in the middle are going to be gray. Now these are known as mid-tones. Mid-tones, like all of this. You see one, this is a little bit different. So right now I see all of this as one family, the light family, all of this as the grayscale, the gray family, which is the midtone, and all of this as the shadow family. All right. So we've divided it into light, mid, and dark. The most dangerous, or like I would say the most kind of activity that happens in a drawing is in the mid-tone region. Okay, because the darks are pretty quiet and the lights are pretty quiet. So everything happens mostly in the mid-tone region. All right. I'm going to show you how that works in just a couple of minutes. But I just want to make sure that this is clear because this is the absolute basic of any kind of painting. Okay. Just give me a thumbs up. Seema, if you get everything, just let me know.
Yes.
Perfect. If you have any questions, do feel free to ask. For now, I'm just going to get rid of this. We will see the materials that I use so that we're not just constantly like getting too theoretical because otherwise it gets a little boring. So I'm going to share my screen, my camera, and show you basically what I mean by all the materials that I use. And then I'll do a little demo for you. Okay, I think you can see things. All right. So this is kind of the basic setup that an oil painter should have. If you're going to use acrylics, this plus, I mean, you'll have your acrylic paints, which are probably, I mean, I don't have the best ones, but this one could be good because these have all the basic colors. I would say this is still pretty limited because you could need maybe colors like raw umber and maybe a couple of like purples, but these are pretty good primary colors to start with. Okay, this and some water. So acrylic is quite simple, but oil is a little more elaborate. So we obviously have our palettes. Okay, that's a wooden one. That's a grayscale glass palette. A lot of artists can choose to, opt between both of these. Obviously, this feels much more fancy and painterly, but a good palette, like a glass palette, which has a gray background, will give you a much more neutral and better control of your values when you paint. Okay, that's why I switched from this to this. I still use it, but I prefer the glass one. Next, I have a few charcoal sticks here. This is Nitram charcoal. Uh, the reason that this brand is good is because their charcoals are very consistent. And whenever you start a painting, you want to not first get into it directly with paint, especially if you're a beginner. So we use charcoal to draw it out, whatever our subject is. Okay. Then the next thing is obviously a medium. Oil painting, like paints are pretty thick. Like if you see there's paint here and it's not even dripping, so they're quite thick. Okay. And you have to um, liquefy them a little bit or make them a little bit more manageable by using a linseed oil. Now, there are many different mediums, but linseed oil is one of the most common ones used. It's a drying oil, so maybe if you paint in a couple of days, your painting will be dried. So, other variations that are in the market are also walnut oil or poppy oil, but these are a little bit more expensive and not so worth it. So, this is much easier to deal with. Linseed oil, okay? The next thing is turpentine to clean your brushes. If you want to get a really thin effect of your paint, you can also use turpentine. Always wear gloves when you're using these things because they're slightly toxic in nature, and you should always open a window whenever you're working. Okay, okay, so that's basically your mediums, palettes, some working dry materials important. Then I have a little container in which I put my oil and turpentine. Of course, a few brushes. I have many more, but these are some good ones to have, like a flat tip, like a squarish one, some smaller ones, some round brushes. Okay, so you can have a variation of these in different sizes. And then, of course, is our the thing that we work on. So this is an oil paper, also works with acrylics. If I'm going to do sketches, I prefer this because it's much more easier to like carry around, lightweight, doesn't really mess up my, you know, like it's not too expensive even. So it's easy. Okay. There's also these that are kind of canvas panels. Okay, that's a painting of my grandmother. This is in grisaille. This is a grayscale painting. It's a little bit damaged, but that's okay. I'll fix it later. But this is a grisaille painting. Okay, that's a good a brand, Clairefontaine. They make some good ones. They have bigger and smaller sizes too. This is 30 by 24. So ideal sizes to work small sketches. Okay. Then the most important aspect of painting is obviously paint. So let's just get into that now. Like I have laid it out here. Okay. These are the different brands that I use that are quite like up till now I have had no problems with any of these brands. Tried and tested. Okay. In order of values, I have laid them out. Okay. This is how you'll see them on my palette as well. So I start with a white, which is a titanium white. Okay. The second one is a cadmium yellow. Again, I advise you to wear gloves with all of these. Okay. Third one is a yellow ochre. This is a decent brand. It's not too expensive and does a good job. Okay. This is a cadmium red. All right. You'll see here on the palette. So white, cadmium yellow, ochre, red, cadmium red. Okay. It's slightly more orangey in nature, even though the term is red. This adds a very nice, like it's very good to make skin tones. We'll see how in just some time. So I have like two different types of yellows. One's a cool yellow, one's a warm yellow. I like to keep three different types of reds in my palette. So it's a cadmium red, which is warmer. This is a transparent red oxide, also very earth color, like it's very earthy. It's really good to make skin tones. If you mix this with white, it gives this beautiful sort of earthy skin tone, especially for brown skin tones. And this is a different kind of more cool red. It's difficult to pronounce, called quinacridone red, but it's more kind of good for lips, and it's more rosy in color, more pinkish. So I'll list it down for you because I know maybe some of these pigments are new for you. Um, and I'll write it down for you. If you want to paint landscape, obviously you need a good green. This is known as permanent green. Okay, the brand is not so great, but it's okay. It's not like the worst one. This is a turquoise, a phthalo turquoise. Also nice to have vibrant greens. And once we get into color mixing, you'll understand how to make the best of all of these colors. And then very important color in your palette should be ultramarine blue. Okay, this is a good one, ultramarine blue. Now there are different types of blues. There'll be a Prussian blue, there'll be a cobalt blue, lots of different. There are lots of subtleties, and all of these things exist for a reason. So knowing why they exist will help you to make better choices in your color mixing, in your total result. Okay. Second last is our raw umber. One of the most used colors that you will use because it's a neutralizer. It makes everything a little less saturated so it doesn't look too overwhelming. And we'll see how to use it properly. Last but not the least is black. Okay, this is very important also, but used sparingly most of the time because this can overpower any other color. All right, so that's pretty much all the setup of my materials. Some of these, this is also a grisaille painting, even though it has some bits of yellow ochre in it. All right, so I think that's good to know. You can make some notes. Ask me if there is anything that you need to know. If in your country these certain brands are not available, you write to me and I'll give you other variations as well. All right.
For this that you introduce, you will give us a list of like
Yes,
names and brands. Okay.
definitely. I'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, are you based in India or Europe or which part of the world?
No, I'm in Europe.
In Europe. Okay, great. So, I think all of these brands should be easily available.
Okay.
And in your art store, like close by, whichever, I'll send you a photo and I'll send you a full list of these brands as well. So, these are good beginner friendly so that you can start. Okay. All right. If you want to take a screenshot of this setup, you can, because, and also very important is paper. Okay. Like this is something that you will be seeking out every second that you are painting. So having a good roll of tissue around is very, very, very important. Now we'll see how. But yeah, just if you want to take a screenshot of this, go ahead. But anyway, I'll send you a picture of all the pigments and everything else. Perfect. So now I think let's just get into painting. No, like what I'm going to do now is go back to this image. I'm going to paint both of these, okay? And first I'll start with the cube and then I'm going to start with the sphere. So let me just set that up quickly in 1 second and then um, I'll show you how to paint this. And if possible, if you already have your materials with you, once you're done observing, first don't paint along with me because then you'll be like slightly confused. Just see what I'm doing first, and then you can try it in your own time. Okay? So just give me 1 second and I'll be back. Okay. So here you see my grayscale palette and the surface that I'll be working on. Okay. And here I have some of the linseed oil. All right. It's right there. I'm going to be wearing some gloves, and basically now we'll just see how oil paint actually interacts with each other. The reason that I have a gray palette is because it's not too dark, it's not too light. It's somewhere in the middle, which will help me to start. Basically, it'll help me to see my lights better and my darks better. Okay, because otherwise, it's not a wrong thing to have a white palette or something that's much more um, brown or whatever. But having a good base value is very, very helpful in organizing our mind. All right, so I'm gonna have like a couple of brushes. This is a brand called Rosemary and Company, and they are super good. They are one of the best in the world that create oil painting brushes. So once you are a little more, and they also have acrylic and watercolor brushes. So once you feel a little more comfortable with the painting, it's really good to invest in brushes because they're basically your life source when you're in. And having bad brushes or keeping them in bad health will make your painting suffer. Nothing else. It'll just make you more frustrated. So it's always better to think that like materials actually help you to be much more organized, and investing in good quality will help you to be more make the process more enjoyable. All right, so I'm gonna paint. I will suggest you to, okay, let me just send you a screenshot in the group for you to be able to compare the cube and the sphere. Okay. So keep this in your screen open, and that will be just super helpful for you to compare it as I am doing the demo, and then you're going to do it yourself. All right. We have the cube, And it's much, much, much more easier to paint a cube than a sphere. And we'll see that now in 1 minute. Is because the cube has obviously 3 dimensions, right? So first, I'm gonna just simply draw it with a pencil. I hope it's visible. Everything is fine.
Yes.
Okay. And maybe it looks a little boring at this stage, but I kid you not, if you do this well, all your other paintings happen much more easier. Okay. So my aim is to clear your basics so that later on you're not like, why is this not working? It's important for the basics to be clear. All right. So I'm just gonna quickly try and sketch the cube, nothing too intense. Okay, like I'm not even making it too dark at this stage because we're gonna paint over it. This is just for me to have an understanding. And then I do the cast shadow. Okay. So how many dimensions do we have here? We have one, the one that's facing the light. We have two, the one in shadow. And we have third, which is in the mid-tone. And then, so one, two, three. Okay, that's why it's called 3 dimension. So once we have that, and then we do the cast shadow. So let's just see how that works. I'm showing you the palette so that you understand how the mixing actually happens. Just dipping my paint in a little bit, my paintbrush in a little bit of linseed oil, making sure that if there's any residual paint, I'm gonna just take that out. For which having a paper in my left hand is like extremely important. So what I'm doing is just squeezing it out. Look at how much color there was. Okay. And with the good thing with oil paints is that if you just dip it lightly in some linseed oil and squeeze it out, the color comes out quite nicely. Okay. I don't mind a little bit of yellow because it will make my painting warmer. So that's nice. Also, one thing to know is both white and black belong to the blue family of colors. I know that sounds strange, but so when we study colors, this is going to be more clearer. But there are hue families, okay? There's your red, yellow, blue. So both white and black actually belong to the blue family. So if I use only these two colors, black and white, it'll make a kind of a painting that looks a little more bluer, a cooler side of the painting. That's why I have this third color, which is raw umber. That's going to neutralize my coldness. Okay, let's just see how. So I already have a little bit of oil here. I'm going to create whatever values I'm seeing on the subject. Just make a string of it, okay, over here. So my light, my mid, and my dark, okay, before I actually put it on my paint. In the first few tries, I would actually like suggest you to not even worry about actually painting. This palette work is really, really important for an artist to get comfortable with the medium, to understand how these pigments work, how are they interacting with each other when I'm mixing this with that, or adding a little bit more oil, adding or not adding as much oil. So you'll see how all of that makes a difference in how then you approach, do this on your subject. Okay, that's a pretty neutral one. And then let's do 1 more dark. I'm keeping them connected because I wanted to belong in kind of the same family. Okay. One more thing that I actually forgot to mention is a palette knife. Okay. I think a palette knife is going to be extremely helpful in just thinking about how. So basically, this is what a palette knife does. Okay? If I really need to clean it or scoop out some of the paint and keep it in a big pile, this tool is super super important. In fact, they in the beginning they also tell you to not use a brush while mixing colors. Use a palette knife. Okay, and then I wipe it out easily. My left hand always has a tissue paper because everything needs to be clean. Oil painting can be super messy if you are not organized. All right. Now all this extra around it, I'm not interested in it. I'm just going to clean up my palette and make my life easier in seeing what I really need to be seeing. Okay. Three values on my palette, three dimensions on my cube. That's all I want to see, and everything else can go away. Okay. So I haven't mixed a lot of paint, but I think people who have come to my classes before will know that I emphasize a lot on dark shapes and light shapes. So first I'm going to kind of mark out my darker shape, okay? So I'm now painting on my main thing, slightly marking out. And I'm grouping my cast shadow and my core shadow together at this stage. Okay, keeping it's not very thick at this stage, the paint, because it's a sketch and we just want to understand how, if the values work or not. And don't worry if it looks messy, we are going to clean that up. The beauty about oil painting is that if you make a mistake, you can clean it right up very, very easily. It's not like aquarella or that is watercolors that if you put a mark down, then you cannot erase it. So it's actually quite forgiving of a medium. Okay. Now, dark is dark. Once I put this down, I'm going to see like, how is it feeling? How is it feeling? Everything in painting, yes, it's technical, yes, it's scientific, yes, there are 1,000 rules, but at the end of the day, it comes down to how is it feeling when you are looking at a certain piece of subject. It's simple as that. Okay. If it's not feeling right to you, then scrap it. Doesn't make sense. It's not important. At the end of the day, it should feel like it's something that is um, speaking to you. Okay. So if I want to leave this as it is because I like it, that's my choice. But maybe I want to be super technical and correct it or make it different or whatever. In my understanding, okay, from what I'm seeing now, the cast shadow is fine. Okay, if I reinforce it a little bit, my cast shadow feels all right, actually. Okay, let's just make sure none of the white is falling through. But now that my cast shadow is this value, this is my darkest dark, which let me mark it here, okay, as a value. I'm just going to make a scale here of the values that we use. I think because of the glare, you don't see, but now, yeah. You see, it's much more, it's quite dark. Okay. So I have grouped this and this. Now, once I group this, I feel like maybe this part needs to be slightly lighter. So I mix an intermediate value right between them just to adjust it a little bit. And then simply place it on top of this darker mix. Okay. It's not a hell of a difference, but it will still give an effect of reality because I am looking for the subtleties as the capturer of reality here. Okay, I all these subtleties matter a lot. All right. Once we have our dark base sorted, so I always encourage my students to start with the darkest darks, especially right in the beginning. Why? Because it gives you a good base, and then you can compare all your other values to this darker shade. Okay. Now let's see, like white is obviously slight, like we can forget about it a little bit because our paper is white. Let's see how the lighter mid-tone is feeling. The one I have on my palette here is a little too dark. Let me easily go in and mix one value that feels okay. And having a white and a black here for comparison is always good. Okay. You can just put it down, see how it looks. And if it feels right, fill it in now. And I'm not being extra careful of my edges at this moment because I'm going to put in a background. And all of that is just going to disappear in my screen. All the flaws, basically. Okay. Before I put in the white, I'm going to put in a slight background. This value and this value almost seem quite similar. So I'm gonna, maybe it's a little lighter. So don't worry about perfection right now because it's so fluid, this medium, that a little push and pull can literally change the way that everything looks. Okay. So just be very forgiving with yourself, especially in the beginning, because if it's the first time you're going to use this medium, it's going to be a little bit frustrating. I will not lie. It's going to be a little more intimidating as well. But a few tries and then you'll start to enjoy it. Like it feels really smooth and nice and fluid to be able to see your painting come to life. Now I'm using a little bit of white, like pure white here, okay, just to lock the painting in. I made sure I clean my brush very nicely before I use the white because otherwise, if I don't, then it's going to look quite messy. I see a little mark here. So I just clean my brush. If you see any mistakes, just clean your brush and slightly just go back to the value that you were using and lay it back down. Pretty straightforward. And that's a decent cube I think we've created. Um, can keep refining it as time goes, but you now I'm going to put down all the values that I have used, like I put the dark one. Okay, so that's a decent cue. No, like obviously there are small changes that keep happening, and I can keep refining it further as I go. Make sure that you have one brush that is for the lights and one that is for the darks. Okay, that'll help you to not mix and make everything gray. Good, like darker values are kind of important to give that clean look. Okay, so this was my darkest dark. This value here was something like maybe a little bit lighter. A couple of tries are okay. You don't have to, like, painting is an action that is constantly requiring forgiveness of yourself because at first it doesn't go the way that you want it. And then again it doesn't go the way that you want it, and then again and then again. So you have to be very very okay with the fact that okay, one try, another try, another try, another try, and that's where you keep coming to something that works. Okay, if one thing the painting teaches you is patience and self-forgiveness, then so I have two of my darker shadow values. Then let me put down mid-tone value, which is something like this. Okay, it merges into the background. So this and this are quite similar. And then of course, I have my white models. Okay, slightly muddy here, but that's okay. I'll just put a little extra. So four values and we got a nice cube. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, no questions. Moving further to the sphere. This one is probably like a child's walk as compared to what we will do next, because this is quite simple. Like it has these little clear markers, but a sphere is much more organic in nature. It has forms that turn, like around, and to have a certain understanding of form. What do I mean by form? Anything that is turning has form. Okay, like anything that a cup turns around into space, that is a form. And as an artist, you are going to try to capture that form through the use of values. All right, how? Let's just see it in action. You can try it once you feel like, after you are like done observing, I would suggest you to try it. All right. Again, keep that image open of the sphere that is there. Okay. I'm going to do it right here so that they are right next to each other and you'll be able to compare. Doing this exercise at home is going to help you a lot, a lot, a lot. I promise you that. Um, yeah, we spent like just 3 years trying to manage this particular thing. And in the beginning, if you don't get it, it's okay. All right. Again, same thing once again. I'm going to use a pencil, sketch out my sphere. I don't care about it being perfect. Okay, with the cast shadow. Now, I'm going to use those technical terms that I did at a point, which is core shadow, cast shadow, all of that. Okay. So make sure that you are listening to it properly because when you will be painting, you need to keep that in mind. Is it all visible? Is it okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Oh, again, the same thing, all right? So here I have my drawing. I'm going to divide it into light and shadow, obviously. The way that I divide it is by actually putting in, this is not very black, okay? So I'm actually going to divide it into light and light side and shadow side. So I fill in my shadow side very lightly, easily. The reason that I fill in my shadows before I fill in my lights is because it's like giving it a base to stand upon. If your darks, if your darker shapes are making sense, your lights will fall into place on their own. Okay. So later, as you go into or get more comfortable with painting, you yourself will try to see if it's better to start with the lights, if it's better to start with the midtones. There is an artist called Sargent, um, John Singer Sargent. He is known as the god of painting. He encouraged his students to start from the midtones, okay, from the mid, like this area. But in the beginning, it can be extremely like intimidating if you are not comfortable with. So it's always better to fall on the base, which is the darker side, and then build from there. Okay, so I grouped all my shadow, my cast, and my core shadow. Now, obviously, see a huge difference, right? Cast shadow is darker than the core shadow. So I go ahead and lighten my core shadow. You see how it's looking a little blue? I don't know if you're able to notice, but um, it's somehow looking a little bluish gray, which is where I go ahead and add a little bit of raw umber. It'll automatically make my mixture quite warm, which is what artists want because if everything is cold and like kind of bluish, gives a sad kind of feeling. So, but that is a personal decision, completely personal. So I'm just using raw umber because I like it to look a little more neutral, not too cold, not too. Yeah. Okay, a nice difference between the cast and the core shadow. There is a difference. Cast shadow is the cast shadow with the object that is cast in the shadow, and the core shadow is the core, like part of the object that is in shadow. All right. So we have value. This is our. This is already in my graph, so I'm going to note it down. Core shadow value, then cast shadow value, and then I go ahead with another brush, trying to capture the lights now. And I'll leave a little bit for the, like, I'll leave a little bit of the paper to see the absolute white, but this is sort of a gray zone. And I'm kind of merging it in my cast shadow to create a softer transition here, which will automatically make my sphere turn. You see how it's already looking three-dimensional without much effort? Then I go ahead and add extra white, +2, give it the full range of values. And of course, I need a background. A background is a very, very important aspect when you're painting because um, it is not considered as a separate part. It is a part of your entire painting. You have to keep in mind that it's a personal choice, but at the end of the day, your object is in an atmosphere. That atmosphere is the background and the foreground. So it is influencing your object in many ways. So understanding the atmosphere that your object is in will help you to make better decisions in lights and shadows. And maybe a small suggestion of it is also very um, important. You see here, it's too dark. So I slightly go ahead and correct it very easily. And you can also correct your, like, if your shapes are not feeling nice, the background helps in cleaning them out. Okay. To highlight my light here, like because I see a darker, slightly darker part here. If it's slightly darker here, the contrast will make the lights look much more alive. All right, I think that's good. Now, how do you soften things? Because basically, like transitions are very important, right? We all want to get a painting that's very like, I mean, it depends, but mostly this area where it's gray has a softer sort of effect. So I took a brush that is almost clean, almost, doesn't really matter much. Make sure that it doesn't have any other color for sure. And I just go and slightly start moving this paint around. Now, because oil paints take a couple of days to dry, you can actually keep manipulating it until you get your desired result. Okay, so I'm having a piece of paper. I am just moving that paint around and constantly wiping it on the paper. And then modeling it. The stage that we are at is now called modeling. Modeling your painting is like sculpting actually. Okay, it's pretty round, looks quite 3D. I will clean up some of the lighter areas here. And it's called, like, this part is now feather touch. Like I'm just literally touching the areas with some little paint on it. Okay, so let's mark, since we are creating a value scale, this one is probably this here. The background could be something like that. And we have the lights. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 values to create a sphere that is turning in form. It looks easier when it's being done. When you do it, it might feel more difficult. But now let's take an account of things. I would like my terminator line to be evident, which is generally a bit darker than the core shadow. Why is it darker? Is because um, your object is like this, no? Let me think this way. Your object is turning like this, in this direction. Okay? In this direction. Okay? Somewhere here is where it turns completely into darkness. So this part gets very least amount of light, this part. Okay? And here, like in this area, there is reflected light from your background. That's why it's a bit lighter. So if I don't put this, now what is this shadow missing? It's missing a reflected light. Give it a little more realistic look. And obviously your reflected light won't be as light as your like light family. So just a hint of this. Why? Because the the background is reflecting a light in your core shadow. Make sense? So this ball looks pretty kind of real at this stage that it is in. Okay? You'll see it in different dimensions. Okay, so that is basically values for you. And two exercises that I would recommend that you do, which would help you greatly in getting to understand your medium, getting to understand values, and getting to understand form. Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat area. These three things are very important in the basics of oil painting. Very, very, very important. I cannot stress it enough. All right, let's just take 1 minute of break. And if you want, you can go ahead and try to paint these. Do you have any questions so far? The same thing can be done in acrylics very easily. Just make sure you have 2 or 3 clean brushes, not too big, not too small. And you keep a separate one for the lights, a separate one for the midtones, and a separate one for the darks. And draw your outline of the subject first so that you're not scrambling around too much. And yeah, keep in mind all of those aspects of shadow and light that I mentioned. Then we'll get into more details. I've also planned a little bit of basics of color theory. In one session is not possible to teach everything. It is an intro to oil painting, so I'm going to introduce you to some of the concepts. But I tell you that it's not easy to talk about each and everything in a couple of hours. Okay, so let me know if you're going to try this right now or later after the class, whatever you feel comfortable, and you can send me photos for me to give you a feedback. So let's just take 2 minutes off and then we'll see you in 2. All right, I'm back. Okay. I think that was quite a detailed demo of values. Um, I'll just do a short recap, which is I used titanium white and ivory black and raw umber. These three are my core colors that I used to achieve the results that I did. This is how the painting ends up looking. Okay. And in the first few stages, in the first couple of tries of painting, try and make sure that you are spending some time on this study so that when you actually paint any other object that falls under any of these categories, you have this as a base and a very, very strong base to fall back upon. Okay. If things don't make sense, you go back to the basics. All right. Next thing. I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of color theory. All right. This is going to help you in making better decisions when you want to paint anything, a landscape, a portrait, some kind of abstract art. Understanding your colors is going to give you a lot more control over the vibe of the painting that you are going to go for, in understanding how colors interact with each other. Because um, in thought process, we know that okay, a color that if you put a yellow and a blue together, it makes a green. But when we actually paint it, the color green will probably be completely different. It might still be a green, but it might be very different in terms of look and feel. And you might feel like, okay, this is not what I had in mind. So knowing your colors will give you a good understanding of how you are going to achieve a certain look of your paint. Okay, I will share my screen and we'll understand a bit of color theory. Give me a thumbs up if everyone is on board. Also, please ask me questions. It helps me to understand your state of mind and yeah, basically give you the right answers if you're lost on anything.
On my side, just I think how to hold brush is also important. Yeah, there is a
How
technique.
to? How to?
Hold the brushes.
All the brushes. Okay. Depends on what brushes you have. You can send me a photo of your brushes. I can tell you which ones are working, which ones don't. Usually, these are professional grade brushes, no? So they have a long handle.
Yes.
Is because we actually hold it from the back so that we can see the painting and have more control over it. But
Mhm.
in the beginning, you might be using like short handle brushes. It's
Mhm.
better to hold them from the back. Anything is also with a pencil. If you hold it like this, you think you have more control, but your area of you're only using your wrist when you're using.
Mhm.
You're using your when you put it in the back, when you hold it from the back, you're using an entire hand to draw. It actually gives you more control. So try it a few times. In the beginning, it's like trying to skate or trying to swim or whatever. But eventually, you'll see how much control it gives. So generally, do you enjoy doing more black and white paintings, or are you interested in colors also?
I like colorful also.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All of us do. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you. Today is an express class, so I'm trying to get as much as possible, okay, in this and give you as much knowledge as I can. Um, so use this to your advantage, and yes. All right, let's go. I think you see my screen. This is color theory. Uh, let's just see what are some of the basics. Okay, you have your three primary colors, which are yellow, red, and blue. The reason that these are primary colors, primary, is because no other color can be created mixing these two colors. But you can create all the colors using just these three, literally all. Okay, so you can create now. What is it? Knowing primary colors will help us and guide us to secondary colors. If I mix a yellow and a red, it gives me an orange. Okay. Red and a blue gives me a purple, and a blue and a yellow gives me a green, which is secondary colors. All right. So, in the past, like when people actually industrialization and the Renaissance and the introduction of chemicals in industry has really revolutionized how artists approach color in modern day scenario. Because before they used to have to use colors from the earth or from stones or from leaves or from, like, there's actually um, one of the most important, like most expensive pigments is made from the stone lapis lazuli, which can be found in Egypt. It's a blue, and it was so expensive that like it was almost impossible for every artist to afford it. But when industrialization happened, then is when ultramarine blue and cobalt blue and Prussian blue, all of these came into existence. And if you see Van Gogh's paintings, he was obsessed with cobalt blue. Like when that's when the Renaissance started, and these colors were introduced. And you can see Claude Monet, Van Gogh, all of these are Impressionist painters. They have, you won't see those blue colors happening in like a Rembrandt. Rembrandt is from the 17th century. His paintings are mostly warm, like earth tones, oranges, yellows, reds, is because that he was only able to access those colors at the time. But then, as modernization happened and more colors were available, artists' palettes started to see much more variations and much more options for opening. Like it's like a whole new world open to them. So Van Gogh actually went completely crazy when he had blue on his palette, and he used it a lot. You can see that in his works. And purples were also quite popular. Okay, purple was also a color that could not be achieved very easily because there was no blue. Orange and yellow, red and yellow were still there. So yeah, so blue and purple were are fairly new colors as an addition to the artistic journey. So primary colors, secondary colors. Then obviously we have the warm and the cools. Okay, a painting is usually in the warm, cool, a combination of both. So you can choose whatever your vibe is. All right. Then we also have, okay, now this is very important to know. You can take down notes for this. Okay. Complementary colors and analogous colors. Complementary are colors that are on the opposite side of the color wheel. Okay, so if that's a purple, the opposite of that is a yellow. Okay, then a green's opposite is red, orange opposite is blue. If I mix a purple and a yellow on my palette, it will give me a gray. That means they cancel each other out, which is why they're complementary. So knowing how to use complementary colors either lets you like either lets you take a decision that make each color sing, because if I put them next to each other, like if I put a purple next to a yellow, the yellow will be much more brighter, much more richer. But if I put them mixed together on one, the color will be more gray. Okay, so knowing how to use complementary colors will give you so much control on how you are vibrating your painting. Okay, how you're creating a vibration in your paintings. We are going to see examples, but this is just for you to know that this concept of complementary colors will give you a whole new perspective on how to deal with colors. Then you're going to think about, okay, what color, if I put down a yellow, what should I put next to it? What will make it much more um, vibrant? All right, that's complementary. Then there's analogous colors. Also a good combination. Now these are combinations, okay? Like these are used by artists to create much more lively paintings, create a lot of fun play. And by that I don't mean that it has to be all in the light side of, like, funny things. But even in a face, like now that I have a developed eye after a lot of exercises, I can see a lot of purples, blues, um, lavenders. Obviously, like the main color of all human, most human faces will fall under the orange category. Okay, it'll either be a dark orange, a medium orange, or a light orange. Now, within this, there's a lot going on. So, let's say orange is your base color, you'll have greens here, purples here. So, as you go further into this game, you'll start to notice a lot of these things. Okay. One good exercise for you is to notice the shadow when the sun is up, like when it's a sunny day. Notice do what color is the shadow of the objects that is around you, just of a building, of glass, of something. Just notice the color of the shadow. It's not black, it's not gray. It's going to be some color. Okay. So just try and like this is a good thing to train your vision. Look for these colors, like focus on a certain aspect and see those, whatever the color is speaking. And don't let your logical brain work in this. Because your logical brain will say, oh, this is shadow, it's going to be black. It doesn't work like that. Shadows also have a color because your sun is not a black and white object, it's a yellow object. If a yellow object is casting a light, everything else around it is going to be influenced by it. So, knowing that, knowing this theory will help you make better decisions and not make your shadows black, you know, which kind of kills it. It makes it dead. Okay. Next, we have analogous colors. These are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. That means from a similar family. So, a blue, indigo, and a purple, or a pink, red, and yellow, orange, or a green, um, turquoise and a blue, cerulean blue. So all these are from a similar family of colors, and the correct use of them also creates a very beautiful effect. We'll see some examples as we go by. Here I have highlighted, do not shade with black. If you're using color, then use color with everything, even if you're doing a shadow. Okay. So, for example, a red ball will not have a black shadow. A red ball will probably have a darker red shadow or something that is a little more in the same family but not black. Okay. This will um, yield you a better looking painting at the end. Also, here I mentioned that remember, shadows depend on the environment and the light source. Always. This is like really, really like key. Okay. So we're not going to get too technical right now, but if you can tell me, just by looking at this, if this painting is green or if it's orange, how does it feel? Is it feeling green or is it feeling orange? Anyone? Green. Yes. Yeah, that is correct. Is because the whole mood of the painting is green, even though there are orange elements in it. Okay. This is a painting by Renoir. Okay, let's just for 2 minutes try and understand how a master thinks and why has he taken certain decisions in this painting. Understanding old masters will give us not only a peek into history, but also like they mastered this technique. So understanding paintings of old masters gives us a much better understanding of decision making, and we use that. Okay, so I'm not going to read the thing right now because I just want you to look at this, the background, the foreground, and the midground. Okay. The background is having quite less information, and so is the foreground, quite less information. Most of your activity is happening in the center. Okay. Let's focus on the shadow that is cast upon by this little guy here. What color is this shadow? Okay. It has elements of blue, it has elements of green. Okay, the whole core shadow of this fruit here is also orange, obviously because the whole object is orange. All right, So keeping a cool shadow against a warm object is making this much more alive. The same thing happening here. Even here, all right? Look here. He's not put a very harsh shadow because it's a lit painting. It's not a dark painting. There is light. It's not like a noir. It's quite light. But using kind of cool shadows to make our warms sing is going to be is giving us a lot more, like, even though we don't notice it at first, is what is making this painting so much more alive. Okay, so yeah, if I actually take a screenshot of this, let's see how if we manipulate it, and let's see how this looks in Photoshop. Okay, because we'll see how if I make this painting a different color, how the mood of it changes. All right, I'm going to share my Photoshop in just 1 second. Okay, so let me color pick some of these shadows. So you'll actually see, you see it's a quite a blue, a gray blue, but it's still blue. Okay, here it's a green. All right, there. All these are cool shadows that are happening. Now, when Shweta said that it's a green painting, she was correct, because let's see how if we change things. Um, where are the colors? Color balance, okay? Let's make this a little more orangey. Let's see. That looks too, if I was to make this painting like this, it looks too saturated to me. At least personally. It looks like, oof, I can't really look at it. It's too much. This is adding such a nice balance to the whole composition. So knowing that my subject is very warm in its natural habitat, like in its natural color tone, and placing it against some cooler tones of the background and the foreground is giving it a much more beautiful, coherent, balanced look. Okay, understanding colors will let you make these decisions, and this you can apply not just in a painting, in literally anything. If you know that if your undertone of your own skin is more cooler or warmer, you can pair the right kind of clothes for yourself. Okay, knowing colors will give you a huge leg up in understanding yourself, in understanding subjects, in understanding nature, in understanding everything that is around you. All right. Going further, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Um, we will also try to fit in a color study if possible at the end of, I mean, right towards the end of this workshop, because I would like for you to see how colors actually work in real time. So, but before that, I need to give you this theoretical knowledge so that you know what we are talking about when I actually do. Okay. Now here we are seeing certain examples. These are vibes of paintings. Okay, artists try to keep it kind of like, they want to make their lives easier because there's so much going on in painting. There's like 1,000 materials. There's so many colors to choose, like not to choose from, but to think about. Brushes, oil, turpentine, everything is getting messy. So the aim of an artist is to make their own life easier. But at the same time, they want to capture reality to its best. So how can they have more control? One is limiting their palette. Okay, if I have all the range of the colors, like of the rainbow, I'm going to be overwhelmed and not be able to take great, amazing decisions because I'm going to be like, what do I do? That's too many colors. So an artist tries to limit themselves to a limited palette. Okay, what is like? It's called the Zorn palette. I'm gonna write it there. It comes from this guy called Anders Zorn. Basically, he used the pigments black white, raw umber, yellow ochre, cadmium red, and ultramarine blue. This helped him to achieve most of what he wanted. Okay, he because he had a yellow ochre, he had a red, cadmium red, and he had a blue, ultramarine blue, and black and white to make it darker or lighter. So you could achieve everything with just these colors. All right. So let's see here. If you go for certain kind of like color palettes, the vibe of your paintings change, right? Orange is more energetic. Yellows are more happier. It can also be overstimulation. So like if it's too yellow, it can look like a little overstimulating. Okay. Whites are obviously more peaceful, clarity. This is all subjective. It's open to like discussion, but it's just kind of an idea to understand how different artists have thought in the past and how colors has affected their paintings. Okay, so purples here we have Paul Signac are more about like relaxation, peaceful lavender colors. Red is aggression and love, like affection and hate, both they go together. Greens are more serene nature. Green is one of the paintings, like one of the colors that are much more comfortable for the human eye because we see a lot of trees, we see a lot of like nature naturally are supposed to. So green is a much more like calming color for both for like humans in general. Okay, here you can see how the artist has approached this piece. Okay, so what do you think? Is this a cool or a warm painting? Yeah, yeah. Even though there is no yellow happening here, an addition of this yellow here has helped the artist to make everything else much more cooler. Okay, because if I was to only put like the first image, colors are much more in the gray zone. Okay, the artist chose to add a little hint of yellow for all the others to sing louder. All right, so just these tiny decisions go a long way in creating a piece that is much stronger. Okay, some more examples. Now, here we see a painting that has mostly neutral earth tones with some hints of cool. All right, then we have yellows as well. So none of them are too saturated. They're all pretty neutral colors, like earthy tones. Okay, by saturation, what do I mean? Saturation is like this is probably saturated. This is extremely saturated, this area. Whenever we're painting real life objects, they won't be as saturated. Okay, so understanding these now, I'm going to show you how to do this in real time, where I'll take an image and do a color study of it. Um, Basically, mix colors for you and see how it works. This is a complementary painting. This would be an analogous painting mostly, okay, because all these colors are quite similar with one addition of something that's out there. This is a complementary painting because it has orange, green, purple, a lot is going on. If I focus, the light is completely green here. And the shadows here, the reflected lights are super purple. So green is the opposite of purple. Like if we see, green is somehow more or less a complement of purple. And this is again an analogous painting where mostly everything is warm. Also gives a nice effect. So you see how different variations give us a very different feeling. This is much more dramatic. This is much more serene. It feels much more calming. Okay. So to get to this level, it's like you have to know anatomy, you have to know shadows, this, that, everything. And we'll step by step, I mean, we'll understand all of that. But today's class is mostly about oil painting. That's why I'm not focusing so much on anatomy and other things. Okay. So values and colors were my main focus. In the last few like minutes that we have half an hour left, more or less. You will see my palette again, and I am probably going to mix one of these palettes. Let's do this one, okay? And we'll see how all of these colors are achieved with our color palettes. All right? Maybe I'll try and do a slight, like a basic blocking of that piece as well, so that you see how I think when I'm actually painting. So I'll do the like portrait. Should be visible. I'm trying to get an angle where the glare is not so much. So all this I'm just gonna clean up. Making sure that having a clean palette all the time is your responsibility as a good artist. Because trust me, it's so helpful. Because before I used to be lazy about it. But since I've been a little more strict about keeping a clean palette, clean brushes, everything organized, my life is easier. So it's better. Um, this is where I usually store my colors. Okay, this is kind of a separate palette that I created so that I have more space on my main palette. You can choose to do this also, but it's okay to just have everything on the same place. So I'm a white, black, raw umber. Don't know if you can see. Maybe remote. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. Black, white, raw umber, yellow ochre, cadmium red. Okay. Now I'm sending you the image in the chat so that you have it there. And as an exercise, you're gonna have to mix one of these colors, color schemes next to each other. Okay. So, okay, I think you can see it in your laptops or screens. I sent you the color scheme. I'm gonna create that here on my palette right now and then try to paint it. Okay, let's go. The first one, I'm going to do it in the same order that you see. I'm using a palette knife. Um, Picking up a little bit of yellow ochre. I see that it's slightly desaturated. Okay, this is the pure color straight out of the tube. But in my color palette, I see it a little bit desaturated, so just a touch of white. Okay. Now, if you notice, I'm mixing quite a bit of it because I'm going to make all my other colors from this. So I'm creating a base through which I will create. The reason is because I want all of them to be connected. Okay. So that's my first color, lightest that I see on the palette. Second one. Now I see it kind of a greenish zone. So let's add a touch of ultramarine blue. Okay, if it's getting too thick, we add a touch of oil. Now, if that's too green, let's compare. Maybe that's a little too green. Okay, let's use a little bit of warm. That's raw umber. I also see a bit of red. Now that's transparent oxide red. Now I think that's pretty good. So you see, this actually had a mix of blue, raw umber, and red to achieve this. Okay. Next, use a little bit of my old one to make the next color. Okay, so that's a little more. I see red. I see below umber. Let's see how that looks. So when okay, that's too red, right? It's okay. That's fine. This is probably close to the next one. So if it works, I'm gonna save that color. Why waste it? This is probably the second last one that I see. So if that works, I'm gonna save it and maybe try again at this one. This practice takes a while. It's okay. Be patient. So yellow ochre. I'm not using black as yet, okay? Because black always overpowers the color. So I try to make it darker with everything else that's possible, and black is my last resort, always. So that's that. That is probably a little more greener. So I add ultramarine. What are we doing here? We're basically trying to understand the coolness, warmness of a color, the darkness, and the lightness of a color. It's kind of like a fun activity that you can also do because really helps to like it challenges your brain to think, and especially when these colors are very randomly neutral, it can be difficult to understand which one it actually is. This is why a palette knife exists, so that you have full control of it. Maybe close, but probably a little lighter, I would say. So I'm not lightening it with white, but going with blue. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay. And last but not the least, it is not a black. It is a dark brown, purple, red, sort of like red family. Okay. Let's see how we can get that. So I'll use a little bit of this and some red. I think I like that. Okay, so we've created our color palette. Um, it's really good to do this right before you start to paint so that you are not scrambling for paints later. Okay. I will put this aside. Maybe need more of it later when I actually do the painting. And now I'm going to try and see how this artist has thought and try and replicate it on the. So it'll be a quick study, okay? It won't look exactly like our reference, but at least to try and get into the head of this artist, okay? So demo coming right up. Is everything visible?
Yes.
Okay. So first things first, I'm going to like tone the canvas. What does that mean? Uh, I'm going to check a neutral base, use it quite like nothing in this painting is purely white, no? So I want to make it a neutral color, at least the area that I'll be working, okay? So I'm gonna quickly de de-white it or neutralize it with a raw umber. Raw umber is one of the most common colors that artists use, and I'm using a bit of linseed oil or turpentine. So this is kind of marking my territory, knowing that I'm going to be working in this space. Okay, I think there's a lot of glare. I apologize for that, but let me just fix it. I think we can keep it a little further. Just give me one second. Yeah, I think that's a little more visible. Better. Okay, so essentially what I've done right now is uh, created a base and I just take a piece of paper and um, soak it all up. Okay. Then I'm going to be drawing directly with my pens or like my brushes right now because we don't have a lot of time. Ideally, I would go and make kind of a pencil drawing of this. Okay? So I'm going to mark out a general idea of the bigger shapes, shadows. The shadows here are pretty warm. Okay? So marking that out. And this is called, this phase that we're on is known as the block in. We're blocking it in. This phase takes a while and should take a while because here you are doing all the manual labor required to have a good base for your painting. Okay, so kind of loosely marking it in the shadow shapes. So I'm using the palette that I created already. So this is the darkest one. How you see how I'm going with the darker values first, like we did in the cube and the sphere, because it's giving the whole thing structure. Darker shapes give the whole thing structure. Okay, then I'll mark out my center line, horizontal, nose, lips, chin. It's not perfect, and that's fine. So this is the blocking. Okay. Then now, next thing would be to try and understand the. I'm gonna put markers for my saturations in my background, like what is going to be lighter, what is going to be darker, how saturated, how desaturated. Just blocking in basic colors that I see. Okay, it's easier to start in the background because there's less room for error. And I mean, you can basically mess up and not feel bad about it instead of starting on the face. Okay, just an understanding, really quick. This also tells us how everything all is within our space that we created. I'm not going here or there. So everything stays connected. And giving it a gray neutral wash also keeps the whole thing in a sort of one family dimension. So notice how I'm using the word connection a lot because it's kind of a random law of nature that it's like literally everything stays connected in nature through earth, through water, and in humans through muscle, through bone, in whatever, in animals, everything muscle, bone, skin, nerves. So if you start to create isolated shapes, they don't look like they're part of the same family, which is why we have to constantly keep that idea in mind of everything connected. Okay. Now, next thing would probably be the hair, much more easier to mess up if anything goes wrong. This is slightly more orangey. So I'll add in the lights later, but right now I'm just whatever is my first guess of the color, I'm putting that in. If any of you have sculpted before, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is something like sculpting. It's like having a piece of clay and then trying to get some form out of it. Okay. Now I am adding some of the lighter areas of the hair. Okay. Like we do in value studies, we'll obviously have a lightest light and a darkest dark. Okay. In this case, it's not black and white, it's in color, but it will still have a lightest light and a darkest dark. So maybe the highlight would be one, but right now I'm not looking at that highlight. I'm just gonna do a color markup of what is my lightest light. And this tells me that obviously this part needs to be darker. So I'll go ahead and start to darken it. Maybe too much here. Okay. I think, yeah, the glare is better. So you see, this is kind of a sphere here, And our exercise that we did of the sphere will come in handy right now, basically. The whole painting is more of a spherical zone. So I'm seeing the core shadow working here. This part is the core shadow. And the cast shadow of the face. If this is my sphere here, that's my sphere, no? More or less. Let's put in a kind of yellow for the face. So this is my mid value that I'm putting in. I can keep making adjustments as I go. Okay, this painting will take at least 2 to 3 hours to be done properly. But right now, a quick color study. Maybe the class goes on for 5 10 minutes. Whoever has to leave can leave, no problem. Maybe it goes on for a little extra time. So the ones who are interested can stay. Then I am turning the form here. So this is probably my um, core shadow of the face. So the sphere is turning in there. So you see how I'm applying the concept that I was teaching you of the spheres on this face. And this is how you get dimension, you get 3Dness in your paintings. I just clean my brush and will somehow just melt it into each other. So I'm not going to go into too many features right now, but give you an overall idea of how a painting like this would be approached. Okay. I'm using a reddish cast shadow of the face. And adjusting everything else around as I go. Now, spending maybe what I'm not really enjoying is the desaturated hair. So I'm going to go ahead and make it a little more lively with some. I have some cadmium on my palette, cadmium paints, and some whites basically. So to achieve that orange color, I'm using a cadmium red, transparent red oxide, and some kind of like seeing what however it is. I think that is. Okay. So each object obviously on its own has its own properties. Hair is more fluffy. Her hair is more fluffy, much more three-dimensional, much more like the feel of it is when if I imagine the feel of it, it feels uh like it would fall under the category of I don't know. It's not too it's not a smooth looking feature. It's much more energetic. It has a lot more dimensionality to it. So, keeping in mind whatever subject you are painting, you have to capture its essence. The face is very smooth and much more, um, you know, like even toned, but there's a lot going on in the hair if you actually notice. So, keeping in mind that these things, like every surface has its own texture. To capture that texture, you have to be much more dynamic in certain areas and much more relaxed in certain areas, which means you have to be more noisy in certain areas and much more quiet in certain areas, which will give you a lot of um, like dimensionality, a lot of variation, a lot of fun happening in painting, basically. Because everything is too quiet and your painting looks a little too boring, or everything is noisy and nobody knows where to look. So keeping a good balance will help you. Okay, so if you have to leave, let me know and I'll stop. But if you are going to stay, I'll continue. Just give me an idea of what you're thinking. Okay, cool. So I think I'll just go on for maybe 5 to 10 minutes more. Um, um, so you see, oil, like acrylic, has yeah, that's okay. Um, Oil and acrylic both have they are both opaque in nature. Opaque means like generally opaque. That means they are not translucent. So you can layer them and it will not affect the other um, you know layer that is beneath it. So basically, if I created one circle, if you can see, I created this and then I put one thing on top of it, and then I added this little thing on top of it, like actually like sculpting. So you understand? If you have questions, please ask me because when I paint and I talk, I think I get a little ahead of myself. Creating the eye socket here. See, I'm not directly painting the eye. So I'm literally not thinking this is a face. I'm thinking this is an egg and just something painted on an egg, which gives me kind of more neutrality towards my subject. So I'm not being affected if it's not perfect at first. All these earrings and stuff doesn't really matter at this stage. First, we just want all the basic colors blocked in. After I have more or less my After I have more or less my basic color lane, I can actually just clean this brush just around and model the form. So move the paint around because it's thick enough so that it can be moved around and it's wet enough that it can be uh, modeled basically. So you have to, if you paint too thin, you will not be able to model it. So you have to make sure that you're using a decent amount of paint on your canvas to be able to move it around. This approach of painting is called alla prima painting. Alla prima. Alla prima means wet on wet. So everything is um, kind of more dynamic. There's 1,000 different ways that a painting can be approached. Um, this one is one of my signature styles, and also that one that I feel much more is much more enjoyable to paint. So alla prima has been done for ages. I think it's an Italian word. Alla prima. So you're kind of understanding, right, where I'm going with this. It is starting to turn form. That means it's looking three-dimensional. And you push and pull. So if something doesn't work, I'll try to correct a few things, maybe add, delete, whatever. And all this from the palette that I created. Of course, it looks a little bit messy once you start to work on it. So that's how it looks right now, with the addition of a little bit of a cadmium orange, which you will keep adjusting as you go. And you'll see how you naturally take certain decisions that are going to make your painting um, how you envision it. So be open. You don't have to be very strict. Okay. A touch of the understanding of the eyebrows. I'm not going to go crazily into details at this stage because we don't have the time or the space. But I think this gives you a good idea. This is a color study. And before doing bigger paintings, artists will always do these small studies to understand how the values work, how the dimensions work, how color is related to each other. Just a suggestion of the eyes, and I think it should be. And then if I want to lighten certain areas, I'll just take the yellow or my lighting tone and add it in certain areas. And everything is pretty much soft. It's not soft by that I mean there are no too many harsher lines that are happening. So at this stage, I don't want to get too crazy with details. Okay. You see how this got really nice and soft here? Every time that I choose a new color, I'm writing. Then, just to give it the final form of creaminess, I'll add a nice white highlight to give it that nice shiny look that this person has, because that highlight is telling her that this model has kind of a, it's also an artistic decision to make it more beautiful, but this model probably has more shiny skin. Matte effect will probably not yield that kind of highlight. Okay, so understanding surfaces will also make you help with better decision making skills. This is a basic color study of our model using an analogous color scheme. You saw how I mixed colors, you saw how I placed them, how I modeled them, and unfortunately, it's not a very long class, so we didn't see it like going into details. That'll take a whole session on its own, maybe 2 to 3 hours. But you got the idea, right? So I can keep working on this now for a while. Um, and yes, basically, in today's session, it was my aim to complete values and to complete color and to understand how they all work together. So I hope you had a good time and I hope you got some knowledge out of it and I hope that you can use it. Send me your works, ask me any questions that you have, and I hope you have a good lesson. I had fun teaching it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good day. See you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.